The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Part 3. At the highest point in Tarifa, there is an old fort, built by the Moors. From atop its walls, one can catch a glimpse of Africa. Melchizedek, the king of Salem, sat on the wall of the fort that afternoon and felt the Levanta blowing in his face. The sheep fidgeted nearby, uneasy with their new owner and excited by so much change. All they wanted was food and water. Melchizedek watched a small ship that was ploughing its way out of the port. He would never see the boy again, just as he had never seen Abraham again after having charged him with his 1/10 fee. That was his work. The gods should not have desires, because they don't have personal legends, but the king of Salem hoped desperately that the boy would be successful. It's too bad that he's quickly going to forget my name, he thought. I should have repeated it for him. Then when he spoke about me, he could say that I am Melchizedek, the king of Salem. He looked to the skies, feeling a bit abashed, and said, I know it's vanity of vanities, as you have said, my lord, but an old king sometimes has to take some pride in himself. How strange Africa is, thought the boy. He was sitting in a bar very much like the other bars that he'd seen along the narrow streets of Tangier. Some men were smoking from a gigantic pipe that they passed from one to the other. In just a few hours he had seen men walking hand in hand, women with their faces covered, and priests that climbed to the top of towers and chanted, as everybody about him went down to their knees and placed their foreheads on the ground. A practice of infidels, he said to himself. As a child in church, he had always looked at the image of Saint Santiago Matamorso on the white horse, with his sword unsheathed, and figures such as these kneeling at his feet. The boy felt ill and terribly alone. The infidels had an evil look about them. Besides this, in the rush of his travels he had forgotten a detail. Just one detail which could keep him from his treasure for a long time. Only Arabic was spoken in this country. The owner of the bar approached him, and the boy pointed to a drink that had been served at the table next to him. It turned out to be a bitter tea. The boy preferred wine. But he didn't need to worry about that right now. What he had to be concerned about was his treasure, and how he was going to get it. The sale of his sheep had left him with enough money in his pouch, and the boy knew that in money there was magic. Whoever has money is never really alone. Before long, maybe in just a few days, he would be at the pyramids. An old man with a breastplate of gold wouldn't have lied just to acquire 6 sheep. The old man spoke about the signs and the omens, and as the boy was crossing the strait, he thought about omens. Yes, the old man had known what he was talking about. During the time the boy had spent in the fields of Andalusia, he had become used to learning which path he should take by observing the ground and the sky. He had discovered that the presence of a certain bird meant that there was a snake nearby, and that a certain shrub was the sign that there was water in the area. The sheep had taught him that. If God leads the sheep so well, he will also lead a man, he thought, and that made him feel better. The tea now tastes a little less bitter. "Who are you?" a voice asked him in Spanish. The boy was relieved. He was thinking about omens, and someone had appeared. "How come you speak Spanish?" he asked. The new arrival was a young man in Western dress, but the colour of his skin suggested that he was from this city. He was about the same age and height as the boy. Almost everyone here speaks Spanish, he said. We're only 2 hours from Spain. Sit down, and let me treat you to something, said the boy. And ask for a glass of wine for me. I hate this tea. There is no wine in this country, the young man said. The religion here forbids it. The boy told him then that he needed to get to the pyramids. He almost began to tell him about his treasure, but decided not to do so. If he did, it was possible that the Arab would want a part of it as payment for taking him there. He remembered what the old man had said about offering something you didn't even have yet. I'd like you to take me there if you can. I can pay you to serve as a guide. Do you have any idea how to get there? The newcomer asked. The boy noticed that the owner of the bar stood nearby, listening attentively to their conversation. He felt uneasy at the man's presence, but he had found a guide and didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. You have to cross the entire Sahara Desert, said the young man. And to do that you need money. I need to know whether you've got enough. The boy thought it rather a strange question, but he trusted in the old man, who had said that whenever you really want something, the universe always conspires in your favour. He took his money from his pouch and showed it to the young man. The owner of the bar came and looked as well. The two men exchanged some words in Arabic, and the bar owner seemed irritated. Let's get out of here, said the new arrival. He wants us to leave. The boy was relieved. He got up to pay the bill, but the owner grabbed him and began to speak to him in an array of angry words. The boy was strong and wanted to retaliate, but he was in a foreign country. His new friend pushed the owner aside and pulled the boy outside with him. He wanted your money, he said. Tangier is not like the rest of Africa. This is a port, and every port has its thieves. The boy trusted his new friend. He had helped him now out of a dangerous situation. He took out his money and counted it. We could get to the pyramids by tomorrow, said the other, taking the money. But I have to buy 2 camels. They walked together through the narrow streets of Tangier. Everywhere there were stalls with items for sale. They reached the centre of the plaza where the market was held. There were thousands of people there, arguing, selling and buying. Vegetables for sale among daggers, and carpets displayed alongside tobacco. But the boy never took his eye off his new friend. After all, he had all his money. He thought about asking him to give it back, but decided that would be unfriendly. He knew nothing about the customs of the strange land that he was in. I'll just watch him, he said to himself. He knew he was stronger than his friend. Suddenly, there in the midst of all that confusion, he saw the most beautiful sword he'd ever seen. The scabbard was embossed in silver, and the handle was black and encrusted with precious stones. The boy promised himself that when he returned from Egypt, he would buy that sword. Ask the owner of the stall how much the sword costs, he said to his friend. Then he realised that he had been distracted for a few moments looking at the sword. His heart squeezed as if his chest had suddenly compressed it. He was afraid to look around, because he knew what he would find. He continued to look at the beautiful sword for a bit longer, until he summoned the courage to turn around. All around him was the market, with people coming and going, shouting and buying, and the aroma of strange foods. But nowhere could he find his new companion. The boy wanted to believe that his friend had simply become separated from him by accident. He decided to stay right there and await his return. As he waited, a priest climbed to the top of a nearby tower and began his chant. Everyone in the market fell to their knees, touching their foreheads to the ground, and took up the chant. Then, like a colony of worker ants, they dismantled their stalls and left. The sun began its departure as well. The boy watched it through its trajectory for some time, until it was hidden behind the white houses that surrounded the plaza. He recalled that when the sun had risen that morning, he was on another continent. He was still a shepherd with 60 sheep, and looked forward to meeting with the girl. That morning he had known everything that was going to happen to him as he walked through the familiar fields. But now, as the sun began to set, he was in a different country, a stranger in a strange land, where he couldn't even speak the language. He was no longer a shepherd, and he had nothing, not even the money to return to start everything over. All this had happened between sunrise and sunset, the boy thought. He was feeling very sorry for himself and lamenting the fact that his life could have changed so suddenly and so drastically. He was so ashamed that he wanted to cry. He had never even wept in front of his own sheep. But the marketplace was empty, and he was far from home, and so he wept. He wept because God was unfair, and because this was the way God repaid those who believed in their dreams. I had my sheep, I was happy, and I made those around me happy. People saw me coming and welcomed me, he thought. But now I'm sad and alone. I'm going to become bitter and distrustful of people because one person betrayed me. I'm going to hate those who have found their treasure because I have never found mine. I'm going to hold on to what little I have because I'm too insignificant to conquer the world. He opened his pouch to see what was left of his possessions. Maybe there was a bit of a sandwich left that he'd half-eaten on the ship, but all he found was a heavy book, his jacket, and the 2 stones the old man had given him. As he looked at the stones, he felt relieved for some reason. He had exchanged 6 sheep for these 2 precious stones that had been taken from a gold breastplate. He could sell the stones and buy a return ticket. But this time I'll be much smarter, the boy thought, removing them from the pouch so that he could put them in his pocket. This was a port town, and the only truthful thing his friend had told him was that port towns are full of thieves. Now he understood why the owner of the bar had been so upset. He was trying to tell him not to trust the man. I'm like everyone else. I see the world in terms of what I would like to see happen, not actually what does happen. He ran his fingers slowly over the stones, sensing their temperature and feeling their surface. They were his treasure. Just handling them made him feel better. They reminded him of the old man. When you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it, he'd said. The boy was trying to understand the truth of what the old man had said. There he was in an empty marketplace, without a cent to his name, and with not a single sheep to guard through the night. But the stones were proof that he had met the king, a king who had known of the boy's past. They're called Urim and Thummim, and they can help you read the omens. The boy put the stones back in the pouch and decided to do an experiment. The old man had said to him, "Ask very clear questions," and to do that, the boy had to know exactly what he wanted. So he asked if the old man's blessings were still with him. He took out one of the stones. It was yes. "Am I going to find my treasure?" he asked. He stuck his hand back into the pouch and felt around for one of the stones. As he did so, both of them pushed through a hole in the pouch and fell to the ground. The boy had never even noticed that there was a hole in his pouch. He knelt down to find Urim